Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Angie. I manage the New Ventures BC competition presented by Innovate BC, along with all the other programs New Ventures BC offers. So today is a topic that I'm very happy to finally share with all of you, how to build a world-class hiring plan and team with Matt and Alison from BackStretch Recruitment Group. I'll get into a little bit more about why I'm so excited about this topic in a moment, but first I'm going to go through some housekeeping. So just a reminder, we do share videos and slides of our events, so we are recording, and usually we get the video up within a day or so. So it'll be on our YouTube channel and off of our website, and we'll send that link out afterwards. New Ventures BC, for those who don't know us, we are a nonprofit here in BC. We've been around for over 20 years. Our mandate really is to help grow BC tech startups. So we do that a few ways. We have the annual New Ventures BC competition presented by Innovate BC, which wraps up next Monday. And then we have a couple different accelerator programs for anywhere from idea stage to in revenue companies. And we have one that focuses specifically on marketing and sales, as well as a more general one. Some upcoming events, as I mentioned, we're wrapping up our competition on Monday, October 3rd. So if you do want to join us, we have a live stream option and we have an in-person option. So please sign up and join us. We also just have a few community events I've listed down below, or some of them are programs as well. And these are just partners, programs we know and like and feel you might enjoy as well. One thing to note tonight is entrepreneurship at UBC's Immersion Week. And one of the events as part of this week of events is VEF and the Vancouver Entrepreneurs Forum, which we do a lot of their events as well. So they're doing fundraising, financing for impact frameworks. I think that's the topic tonight. So I believe you can't sign up. Can you sign up per person? I think there's an issue with the online sign up. You can sign up for the stream, which is—
They've reopened it.
Okay. Never mind then. They were sold out, now they're not sold out. So that's the good news. So definitely visit their website and sign up for a ticket. And I'm hearing the events are going really well. All right, I'm going to thank my sponsors because they are the reason why I get to be here in front of you. Innovate BC is our lead partner, title sponsor. Gold sponsors, EY, Fasken, SFU BD School of Business, UBC Cider School of Business. Silver sponsors, Ace Tech, TELUS Ventures, Output, Vantech, Volition, and of course our many wonderful bronze sponsors, including BackStretch Recruitment Group, who are your speakers today. We also are missing a group, which is Silicon Valley Bank. They just joined us recently, and we're very happy to have them on board as well. And our media sponsors, thank you. And this is us. So if you have any questions about anything I've just said, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to let Matt share his deck. And while he's doing that, I will just share that the reason I'm excited about this topic is a few things. First, I think it's pretty clear that there's been a talent challenge here in the BC tech ecosystem. And this was something I've been talking about with both companies and people on the New Ventures Board of Directors earlier this year. And the question was, well, what could we do to help startups? Because I think startups and recruitment is a slightly different area to talk about versus, say, recruitment in general. And then sometimes you think something and the universe gives it to you. So Blake Ponick is one of our longtime volunteer mentors here at New Ventures, and he introduced me to Matt and Alison here at BackStretch Recruitment Group. And they have a really kind of different perspective on recruitment. And they also recently have been working with Certain, who is a past winner of the competition from a few years ago. And they've been helping them do a lot of hires. So they have a really good insight into both BC tech ecosystem, BC tech startups, and are really interested in sharing it with all of you. So I'm really pleased to have this as the first of hopefully will be a few topics. We will be sending out a survey afterwards just to get your input on what else you'd like to learn about. And if it all makes sense, we'll see if we can keep doing a couple more of these. So with that, I will say thank you again to Matt and Alison for joining us, and I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Angie. The question is, Angie, can you see the slide? deck?
I can, yes.
Okay, perfect. So it's working. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. Top level is Alison and I, based in BC, spent the last 20 years doing world of search and recruiting. One of the things we love is working with companies in growth and companies in startup. So to align with New Ventures BC was sort of a passion project of ours, and we're glad that we're on the team. So Angie threw out a really good point, which is growing and startup style of recruiting can be quite different than large company recruiting. So that's a big one. We like to highlight that a lot of leaders talk about hiring, and it's just interesting from Mark here from Salesforce. I used to know the director for Canada as well, and this is always the top of the conversation, believing the most important thing they do is hiring. So it's kind of a nice place to be in. Okay, so quick intro about us. Everyone signed up today, but the question is why should you be listening? So your time is valuable. So just to let you know, whenever you're chatting with Alison and I, is together 30 years. We've done 10,000 plus hires for companies. We've done over 30,000 interviews. So we've got a little bit of background in doing this stuff. We've actually worked in first party, meaning recruiting inside of companies. We've actually worked for agencies, which is third party companies, and we both have backgrounds in career education as well. So we actually love all different areas. And the ramp up part is a big one. So Angie, thanks for throwing out this certain thing. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. We are now actually at 221 hires from last time I checked, meaning that BackStretch has been the #1 provider to own all the hiring for Certain's growth. So I think we can all learn from that. Okay, so top level on the actual business is, it all started 11 years ago because there's limited options in recruiting. And we wanted to switch that and change that. So first party is awesome until you have bandwidth issues. So if you have HR or somebody recruiting on the inside, it's great, but the bandwidth is always an issue, meaning that most normal people in recruiting full-time can manage between 10 to 15 positions. So what happens when your company is hiring more? And to task HR to do that on the inside, we've seen the same issues, which is it's one of 12 things they have to do. And then when you hire third-party firms on the outside, the constant issue is not focused on our needs and just way too expensive. So we've sort of flipped that model and taken the best of first and third party, which you'll learn more later. Some other things about us, which is kind of nice, is our average placement rate last year, from understanding the need from our clients to actually getting the hire completed, was 14 business days. We manage all levels, which is a good reflection in certain. And we're not limited to Canada. We're based in Canada, but last year, Canada, US, and Europe were all hires. Okay, so enough about us. We got a lot of information from you, everyone who's attending, in terms of what you wanted from us to share. Okay, so Alison and I put our heads together and said, they're all awesome information, but they're all saying the same things we kind of figured out, which is, where the heck should we be starting and why should we be starting here? So this is definitely the foundational conversation for everybody at different stages in your business. And we're trying to really share what to do at the foundational part, because we kind of feel, after seeing a whole bunch of companies do ramp ups in hiring, that if you understand what you can do at the beginning to stop all the mistakes or failures later, then that's the best place to start. So we're not going to be talking about little details today, like the best offer style. We're going to be talking about foundational pieces you can put in right now. The first one is just being aware of time and resources required for recruiting. So we're going to open that up for you. Everyone talks about hiring, but what does that mean? The second thing is we want to talk about today is be aware of the experience you're creating, and we'll show you why. This is really important from the foundational piece. And the third thing is, let's talk about some learning from those who succeed, namely Certain, because they came through New Ventures and we've done over 200 hires for them. So I think it's good that the foundational companies here can learn from that and try to implement that stuff. Okay, so Alison's going to step in, who's partner at BackStretch, and dive into some of the market stats. One of the big questions people were asking is, what is actually going on now? So we wanted to share that with you, and these are all actually, we highlighted the sources here too, so everyone knows what's up. So Alison, please step into the market stats.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, first, and like Matt said, just looking at what's going on in today's hiring marketplace and how does this impact you. So one of the huge factors in recruiting is time. 62%, I saw the stat yesterday, 62% of talent acquisition HR leaders cite time to hire as their most important success rate or metric. And so top candidates are typically only available for 10 days before being hired. And the average time to hire, how long it takes to sign a new employee, so from search to accepted offer, across a range of functions is 41 days. And for software engineering positions, it's actually 49 days. So you can see that gap there. So long recruitment processes and decision-making really mean that it will cause you to lose those top candidates. It'll increase the amount that you'll pay for those top candidates, and it will result in an overall poor selection of candidates. So despite what some people think, longer decision time does not improve the quality of hire. And what matters, so the number one reason people change jobs is actually career development and growth. But the most important considerations in accepting a new job, the number one reason is compensation. Second is professional development. And then third is a better work-life balance. So your job opportunities and offers, as well as your work culture, really have to align with what candidates are looking for. And then the third we're looking at is experience. So this is candidate experience. 49%, half of respondents declined a job offer because of poor recruitment experience. And 80% of millennial job seekers think about whether they're a good fit for a company culture before accepting a position. So again, poor recruitment and employer branding can cause you to lose access to candidates that you may never have even interacted with. And then onto the, yeah, thanks. And then, so, what's the impact on you? So companies lose an average about $15,000 on each bad hire. Team morale can drop by about a third as a result of a bad hire. And related to that is bad hires can result in 36% drop in productivity. So between the loss of top talent and the cost of bad hires, you're creating the best recruitment and hiring process is really vital to your success.
Okay, thank you. So it's kind of doom and gloom, but it's important, right? And we don't want it to be fear-based, but we want people to know about the market. And it's funny, people who do recruiting all day, we're willing to work with different styles of companies, different levels, but the time is what we talk about all the time. So it is number one for us for sure. Okay, so this is about the foundations for your business. So what can you actually think about now and implement now, right? And that's why number one on the list is actually just being aware of the time and resources actually is required when you are hiring. Before you take on the endeavor of hiring, whether it's 1, 2, or 200, we believe you need to sit down as a leadership team and realize the scope. What we see companies that are in ramp ups or trying to ramp up, they don't understand the allocation of time and resources, and it gets muddy when they're going and people aren't being allocated for different tasks in the hiring. Hence, all the stats you saw start showing up. People are walking away, they're not interested in your business, and it actually poorly impacts you. And a lot of people get excited when they hire. So it's not actually out of lack of ability. It's just, it takes a lot of time and energy. And that's when the Glassdoor starts showing up. And we'll talk about that later. So let's just talk about time. So we pulled some stats from our relationship with Certain to give you an insight in terms of how much time things take. Now, we know you're not hiring in 194, but this is going to give you a scope, and you have to figure out in your business who's going to be responsible for what. So in over 19 months, our largest time with Certain, we did actually 194 permanent hires. That's from their chief technology officer all the way downwards across all their divisions. So we actually pulled out our numbers, and it's a lot of hours. Just time interviewing. This is not time reviewing and selecting resumes and all of the work. This is just interviews. They did 607 hours of interviews across different teams. They did 776 first interviews, which they would bring in multiple people into the rooms, and they would do 465 second interviews at 45 minutes each. And then sometimes there'll be finals or more steps involved, which we're not highlighting here, for more senior level positions. So when you're thinking about the undertaking of hiring, ask yourself, do we have the bandwidth and time? And who's going to be responsible for what, to make sure the experience is going to be controlled? The second thing is not just interview hours, but we want to also think about the effort to build the pipeline of candidates. So we're big believers in sourcing and headhunting. So through this time, BackStretch reached out to 3,104 candidates who were not actively applying to positions, but who are actually interested in, but were looking. So what does that mean? So it's also a way that your brand's going to get out there to the world. So the stats are roughly 3% of people are actually applying to jobs right now, but on LinkedIn, when you pay for the fancy tools, 70% are actually open to new opportunities. So it's interesting to think about that, but there's a lot of time and energy just to actually get them in the pipeline. And if you're just doing the ad style, you're only getting about a 3% response rate of the market, but you can actually attract up to 70 with the right style of messaging. So again, who's doing that inside? Who's actually reaching out? And if you're just relying on the responses, it tends to be 3% of the market, which quite, it may not be the best quality. So that's the first thing is, I'm just going to go back there, is time, resources, who's actually going to be able to handle this? We really believe that's the foundation and the first question to ask. Number two, if you are going to actually endeavor into the world of hiring, is we talked about resources, but we're also wanting to talk about this whole weird world of employment branding. It's kind of a buzzword, and quite frankly, we say it all the time, so it's kind of annoying to us. But we just want everyone to think about that, because we believe as recruiting professionals, it's kind of time is number one for us, and your employment brand is number two. If you have a great employment brand and you're working on building that, recruiting for you is really exciting. If you have a poor employment brand, us as partners are not interested in working with you and may actually not want to work with you, which is a reflection because we know it's difficult. So here's some information. We talked about this earlier, but just remember that 89% of candidates actually do in some way evaluate you and your brand before applying. 9 out of 10 people who are thinking about it will actually check you out before they click on an apply or respond to a headhunt. So pretty much everybody. This is an interesting one, but the average candidate actually is spending 41 minutes doing that. Okay, so they're not just 5 minutes skimming around. They're actually spending 41 minutes, and the best candidates spend more time. So some candidates will spend 60 minutes, some will spend 20. But remember, they're all going to do some digging. It's very common to online purchases. You're not very often going to the store to learn about it. You're going and doing your research and understanding, and then making decisions from there. Last one is the 80% of millennials, so the younger job market, is actually really considers not the job, but the fit. So your stuff that they're seeing on your employment brand is going to decide if they can select themselves or deselect themselves. Okay, so employment brand, we just want to give you a definition. It's a branding and marketing that involves the employment experience. We think about it all day. We're helping companies design them. We actually love tweaking it for people. It is not the general, more corporate branding. They can connect, but it's specifically focused on the candidate experience. And our definition, when we talk about this internally, is it's all about creating a consistent and world-class experience from the very beginning to the very end for current and future candidates. So because this is a foundational presentation, if you can think about that now, even if you're not hiring, and you can design a good one, you're way ahead of the game. because a lot of larger companies still have a poor one. Hence, you can see from the stats they're losing a lot of people. Okay, Glassdoor is a big one. So we want to talk a little bit about that and what that means. And then we want to share some stories too. People learn through stories. So Alison, if you mind sharing that one story we talked about, I think it'll give people a good exposure of what the heck goes on with Glassdoor.
So we had a potential client that we were in early stages talking about taking on their recruitment. They're a tech company in a competitive space. They had gained investment money, and they're poised to grow. So, those pieces were all in place, but when we came in, we part of our process is that we do a bit of an audit, looking at them in, what would a candidate look at? So looking at their website, how do they present themselves if they were potential, as a potential candidate would see them, and looking at them on Glassdoor, which definitely, when we got to that part, it was tricky because they had a very low Glassdoor rating, and the reviews were not positive. So we had to, we went through those and got a sense of where they're at, and we had to have a conversation with them, because truly, if we're working against the tide, it's very difficult. We can do all of the things that we know how to do to get the right people engaged, but if the next step, as Matt mentioned, which is often the first step for anyone, is that they're going to go look at the company online, when they hit that wall at Glassdoor and they're just seeing negative reviews, then we may never be able to engage with them. So that can be a really big challenge for any business. We did work with them, and we were able to work with them to kind of shift that. But I had many candidates who we might be even early stages or even late stages in the process, and when they did see that Glassdoor review, it became a point of contention, and we did have people pull out because of it.
Yeah, it's funny because some people like to complain about Glassdoor and say, oh, I don't like Glassdoor, but the reality is it is so important for your employment brand and your growth. So and it's as us as hiring partners, because we typically work with companies over long periods of time to own their hiring. We're not just talking about one-off hires. We're talking about the idea of what is that experience like. So some stuff on Glassdoor here this is directly from Glassdoor, is they actually 60 million users per month are being impacted by Glassdoor right now. And from their stats, 80% of job seekers say reputation is important, which goes to our previous stats, which was connected to 49% decline and 80% of millennials care about fit. So we're all seeing numbers that are very interesting. Okay, so this is a workshop. So we wanted to give some information that you can take away within your team, no matter what size, and play around with. So we just wanted to give you a quick idea. And I believe this would take your leadership team about 20 to 30 minutes to do. So if you're looking for something to do, or you're in a boardroom, or you're doing virtual, we think this is very important to start with. So you can conduct your own employee branding audit. So this is the path that happens for that 41 minutes of research that candidates will do. The first stop typically is LinkedIn. Go on your own LinkedIn. Go compare yourself to your competition, and go see what creates a world-class impression on LinkedIn, and make one. Editing LinkedIn is easy. It does not take a long time, and it makes the first impression a very exciting one for candidates. It's not just your company profile, however. Be aware that your executive profiles, meaning the people that are in leadership, are very important. Candidates will go look at the people they're either going to work with in their teams, but most importantly, their leaders, managers, directors, and C-level. They care a lot about who they're working with and who they're going to get mentored with and trained with. So as we mentioned, 80% of millennials do care about fit. This is fit. What's their background? What does it look like? Is this somebody that can really learn from? If I put 5 years with this business, where's it going to go? What exits have they had? That's why it's not just your company profile. Your executive profile sometimes is going to get more time. Number 2 is Glassdoor, which we've been talking about. do not deny Glassdoor. It is the second stop for most candidates. There's a few reasons for this. One, Glassdoor shows up very high always in Google rankings. So if your company is looked upon on Google, LinkedIn usually number one and Glassdoor is number two. So they're going there anyhow. Glassdoor has so many intricate stages and steps to it that allow people to get lost in learning about your business. Sometimes the best thing on Glassdoor is nothing. So if your business has zero, then congratulations, you've got a blank slate. And we do see that a lot with smaller growth startups who, by the way, we love working with. Like when companies are between 2 to 10, that's an awesome place for us to start with them because we feel it's a blank slate to build on. If there is things there that are happening, and I don't know if a lot of people, I'm sure everyone here maybe has heard of Glassdoor, some have played around with it, some haven't. Glassdoor has tabs for everything. So it's really candidate centric. So what I mean by that, it actually has things like what kind of interview questions does the company ask? What are the salary ranges? What's the managers like? You can actually rate the CEO separately on Glassdoor. So it's very interesting. So take the time. And now there's good ways to respond on Glassdoor too, to actually control your employment experience, which you've seen. We've also seen really poor ways. Third thing is the website, your website. That is usually the third stop for people. If LinkedIn and Glassdoor and the website are connected through an employment brand, the consistency is quite respected and people can get excited. But we're also knowing that we can lose a lot of people through the process. So they will always start on a landing page. And the question is do you have a careers page? Do you even need one? We've worked with companies and done 40, 50 hires for them in the beginning stages from like when they're at that 10-person stage, and they don't even have a careers page, and that's okay. It's just a question of consistency. Okay, next is we want to, and by the way, we never talked about this at the beginning. If you have questions, feel free to add them in the chat. That way we can deal with them later. So any questions, we're gonna be saving about 15, 20 minutes at the end. Okay, learning from those who succeed. So we are talking about Certain because it's really hits home. We're BC based. They went through new ventures, and we want to share over the last 2 years to you what we think from the outside were things that allowed them to become BC's fastest growing company and has gone through now reaching up to 400 employees globally. And what a great way to learn. So Alison and I and the team sat down and kind of said, well, you know, if you're going to share people with what the top 3 lessons that you would take away from Certain, what are they? And people had different opinions on the inside of BackStretch, but we kind of boiled it down and we kind of came up with 3 things that are things I think that you can sit around with and talk about. Okay, number 1, that we really appreciate working with Certain is we described it as building trust with partners early and often. So they were poised for growth. What happened with Certain was a success story of a Series A funding, which we hope for everyone happens in the room today. They went from bootstrapping or their friends and family round to Series A, which was 42 million, which is public. Before they did that, one thing we noticed with Certain as a leadership team is they were working very early to build relationships with partners. So the leadership from previous experiences doing growth tech knew the importance of partners, meaning that they were talking to people that were going to help them in different areas for their company. Because if you remember what happened with Certain in the first 19 months, we had to organize a lot, which is 607 hours of interviews, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. But Certain made an effort to get to talk to us and other possible people to help them in recruiting before Series A, and they kept them in their pipeline. And we ended up the winners. And they were working with 5 different search firms beforehand, and their own HR was managing things. And once they did 42 million, we created an agreement where we took full ownership of their hiring. Now, we're kind of special, but we're kind of not. So what was cool about that, and why we think it's important to share for these companies that are in that growth, is partners are cool because they have expertise. it's not just about recruiting. It's about who do you want to partner with in finance, HR, business development, and having discovery calls with them now. And the beautiful thing about partners is you get to try them out and they can fail. And if they fail, you can get rid of them and you can go find a new one. So that's not unreasonable. And as a company in growth, it's great to find partners that succeed, but it's also great to figure out if they fail quickly and they can't execute on what they're selling to you, because a lot of them can't. So, work with them, give them some test pilot, give them some projects, see what they can do for you. And if they can't do it, find another one and do that for all the different areas in the business, because you just can't do it all on your own. So that's why we think Certain has been very successful, and they just finished their Series B. Is they had a real philosophy from the top of let's find partners, let's test them, and let's see which ones are going well for us and fit what we're doing. Number two, we, as a team over 2 years now with Certain, we kind of felt this really interesting experience, which was, like I mentioned to you, before Series A, they were working with 5 to 7 different quote unquote recruiting firms. They were trying different areas. HR was assisting, and it wasn't working because it was working for that size, but it wasn't working for their new metrics they have to hit once they raised. So because they had partners they were working with, they tried different options, and we came out on top, which we're super happy about. But most importantly than just coming up with a solution, we just wanted to highlight to everybody here is we really felt as a partner that we were supported from the top. And that got us motivated to go work exceptionally hard to help hire for them, to help headhunt. We guaranteed 25 headhunts on our first business day. That means reaching out to people that are not looking but are open to new opportunities. And because there was a buy-in from the top, we knew that we were with them. And that shifted everything for us, which allowed us to make them number one, which also got us to over 200 hires together. So we kind of feel that's a second lesson, is when you're making changes, not just from recruiting, but when the leadership team is together, it's great to have conflict as a leadership team, but when you go to the external world, have you agreed? Did you showcase that buy-in to all the different levels? And is it being passed down that way? We also saw a few initiatives that were created from lower levels based on their growth. And if there wasn't buy-in from the top, we didn't see them do well. So it's a good lesson is if it's not from the top down, it's difficult to implement changes around people, HR, and recruiting. And we felt they did a really great job of building that from the top. The last lesson is clarity. We felt that Certain from the beginning, although it wasn't necessarily hashed out as well as it could have been, because that's life, they always believed as a leadership team what they were doing and that they had clarity on what they were trying to build. And that was great because it allowed us to know who to go after. I mean, at the end of the job, people call us, especially more mature people, they like to call us head hunters, which is kind of a very interesting term. But that's, when I share it with older people in my life, I'll say what I do, and then they'll say, oh, you're a headhunter. I'm like, well, we're whatever, we're recruitment partners. But they knew, and this is the lesson we're trying to share with everybody who's building here, is they did have clarity on the importance of what they were trying to build. And this fits with your employment brands, but they were clear on it. And it did change, but just think about for yourself, what are you trying to build? And do you have brand clarity? There's a few things that why this is really cool is because your team, when it gets bigger, is always having to make decisions on who they should move forward with in first, second interviews and finals. And they can't make the decisions based on ambiguous, loose information. They need to know clarity on what you're building. What we found, there's some interesting stuff on this, but people, if they don't have clarity on the brand of the company they work in, they actually go to their own decision matrix, which tends to be their own biases. So when you're growing a business fast and there isn't clarity on the brand you're building, it can get lost very quickly. So the thing here, which is an interesting word, and I remember sharing this with Alison, is self-selection is a beautiful thing in recruiting. So we love self-selection or deselection. And it's kind of a weird word, but we'll tell you what it means. We want to create your branding and use all of our marketing tools and all of our sourcing tools to be clear on what your brand is. Because we want candidates to self-select themselves in, but we also want candidates to deselect themselves. For example, our company, we're trying and attempting to build a new style recruiting world where we're focusing on trust versus metrics. Recruiting firms are based typically on high volume metrics, and we're breaking that open. Internally, we have no metrics. We build trust. So people who work at BackStretch, when they know that, they hear that, they self-select themselves in right away. So it can save us 3 hours of interviews when we're hiring a new person at BackStretch, because they'll get it right away by that comment if they come with their recruiting background. So I'll give you some examples. With Certain is they developed this rule which makes people laugh, but it makes them different. And they developed a rule of no assholes, which is they branded themselves this. It's on their website. I think this came into fruition kind of a year after they were kind of learning what was working for them. And they actually bought hoodies and shirts when they would go to career fairs and things like this that would say no assholes on them. And then they like did the asterisks with the S's so people knew what was going on. This is a great example of brand clarity. They were successful people that had exits in the past. It may sound a little controversial, but they actually believe it. And like if you work with them as a partner, we believe it as well, which was nice because they didn't tolerate the following things. This is taken from their website, by the way. They don't accept belittling coworkers. They don't accept mocking somebody to seek help. They don't accept refusing to assist others, spreading gossip, undermining those around them, taking credit for work they didn't do, or blaming others for their mistakes. They are crystal clear on this. So people joining to work with Certain, when they see no assholes, you know, it's interesting because they're thinking, oh man, I got a lot of assholes I'm working with right now. I want to talk more with you. So they got away from the concept of what they're building from a technology perspective, and they got into the employment brand very deep and very early, and they kept refining it. So the question to you in the room is, what are you building besides your technology or besides your unique selling proposition? This allows people to select and deselect themselves, which in recruiting is the most beautiful thing. We want people to say to us, oh, this doesn't sound like a fit for me very early. Or we want to sound like, this is exactly where I want to be. And you can do that before with a great employment brand. And if it's very generic, we will lose people in the process, as you can probably see. Okay, good timing. We're 40 minutes in. I'm going to wrap up. And then if there's questions, great. There's a lot of things we can talk more about, and we do plan on doing more of these. This is the foundational piece, okay? So we just want to let everyone remember is recruiting, hiring is time-consuming, it's complicated, it's chaos. Just accept it's chaos. It's still chaos for us. We've been doing it for a long time. But just also acknowledge it's critical. So we also want, hopefully today was about not talking about the nuances later, but talking about foundations now. So for us, the foundations we want to share today is, check in with yourself if you have the resources, time, and abilities to do it before you really kick it off. And 2 is get on your employment brand very early and make it crystal clear and refine it. We also wanted to share is the biggest, most established companies in the world are messing up on this all the time too. So you're not going to be experts in here. A good example is over the last 4 months, we've done 52 permanent hires for a financial institution. And even they were struggling from the inside in terms of how to organize things and how to share information. And we've come in there to streamline that for them. And in the process, we've done 52 permanent hires for that one business. So it's ugly, it's complicated, it's chaotic. Recruiting, I always describe it as surfing. Sometimes you're on the biggest wave of your life and you're scared. And the question is, how are you handling that? And then sometimes surfing, it's calm and there's no waves at all. And you're not hiring and you feel okay. So how are you navigating the ups, the downs, and the peaks and the valleys? And having a partner in chaos is kind of one of those things. We do have two things we want everyone with new ventures to know is this is the end of the presentation. We're here to build trust. So the idea of having a no obligation 30-minute hiring strategy consultation is on the table. So this is not about services. This is about talking about your business and sharing some ideas we think can help your business. We love doing that, and we've got experience to share. So we actually do some volunteering as well around career education stuff, which showcases we enjoy doing this and talking about it anyways. And the last thing is if a company is in need of hiring, we did agree to do 50% discount on a first hire if a company wants to get into it right away because they're in that pain and they're in that need. That's it. So I know that was 40 minutes of a talking head, but we are done. So yeah, do we want to throw it back to Angie, or do we want to, how do we want to share questions if there are some, or?
Yep. So if you have questions, yeah, you can stop sharing, then we can kind of see you both a bit better. Yeah, so thank you for that foundation. And to build on that, you are all welcome to ask your questions either in the chat, or if you want to ask directly, you can put your hand up and I will, you can unmute yourself. So there's a couple in the chat right now, so we'll start with that. So Ian is asking if you have any tips or resources to look at for designing and structuring teams.
Yes. Yeah, I saw that with Ian. So Alison, do you want me to take that? Do you want to handle that?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll say a little bit and then Alison can throw in some stuff at the end because we have different perspectives on a lot of stuff, right? Here's the reality is that recruiting to me, after doing 20 years of this world of chaos, is it's half science and it's half art. Okay, so people that are really good in our space is they can understand the science stuff, but it's actually, we love talking about the art of recruiting. So when you ask about resources of designing and structures and teams, there is like unlimited supply of these things. You just search Google for them. Do we recommend any? No, because the thing is it has to fit what you're building and it has to feel like your brand or your culture. I assume it's probably only going to be shared on the inside. So that's cool. So it's not going to be seen by candidates probably on the outside. It's more just about how you're going to design them. And I think that's probably best saved for a deeper conversation in terms of how you want to roll with that and how you want to structure it. And maybe Ian, we can do that offline. But it's not probably the best answer for you, but it's kind of what I've seen. Every company seems to do it a little different. Alison, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, what your goal really has to be is clarity, going back to that, the clearer you are, circling all the way back to time, the more quickly you'll be able to make decisions as a team. And when you can do that, that is when recruitment will move at the right pace and you're going to see these candidates that you are hoping to see. And so the more clarity you have around the role, the structure of it, how it fits, what your expectations are, then the clearer you can be with your, whoever's doing that recruiting, so they really know what they're looking for, and then you'll know it when you see it and you can make a decision. Everybody wants this slate of candidates to be able to choose from when it comes time to hire, but the reality is sometimes when it's really a tough hire, then you may not have that. You may, be making a decision per candidate. So the more clear you are on what you need, the faster you can make that decision.
Yeah, and I also say to that is we have the value of seeing probably over somewhere between 200 to 300 companies from the inside over our 20 years. So many times people think they want to structure it in a way, and then we say, hey, we've seen companies do it this way, or this way, or this way. Or a really cool company seen like, this is how they rolled. And then people are like, oh, that's very interesting. So you can actually benefit from our experience in terms of just the idea of how to structure. And we actually work on, like, one of the big questions was how to create the best offer possible. We love creating amazing, cool offers that are structured in ways you probably never really thought about, because we've just seen so many offers. So it's kind of one of those things. I see Yvette has a question and some people are saying that is a great question. So I'll just read it out. Okay, this was awesome. Well, thank you. Okay, so a bit of a loaded question. I know it might be tough to answer, but roughly how much should a startup carve out as a budget to receive help from a consulting agency like yourselves? Roughly first 3 to 5 hires. Okay, I'll give you a full transparency of the world of external recruiting because everyone maybe has touched them or hasn't touched them. They all work the same way, which is they all charge you a percentage of the annual salary of a person. So around 95% of the market in recruiting is doing this. When you talk about budgeting, these are things that will help you understand that. They charge in tech right now is flying somewhere between 17% on a very low side to up to 25% on a high side. So if you're going to use a traditional firm style, you're going to be looking at a pretty penny, and that's how they roll. So we do not operate in this model at all. So if you're looking at 100K per person, just a really easy number, you're looking at for 3 to 5 hires. At 3 hires, you'd be looking at roughly around 60 to 75K. It's actually one of the reasons we created BackStretch in the first place, because we have a model that's based on retainer and it's based on long-term success together. So we work on retainer and we do a pricing per employee that's about 50 to 70% less than what you would pay a external firm. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it gives you an idea. If you're going to call up a whole bunch of firms, they're all going to share that they have differences, but they will always come down to the same price point, which, as you can see, as a startup, especially if you're bootstrapping, can be quite pricey. That's why we all came from that. And everybody who works at BackStretch has kind of said, I don't want to be in that model anymore. We operate in long-term agreements, we operate in retainer, and we operate in price perspectives that make sense per hire that allows us to do 200 hires. I mean, you can imagine if Certain was getting charged 20% to 25% per hire, and we did 200 hires. I mean, whatever 200 is by 25,000. I mean, it's completely ridiculous and it would never make sense. So our model got us in the door, if you will. It is what they call, that's a great question. Okay, thoughts on tips in recruiting working with individuals internationally versus Canada? I think both solutions are great. I have spoken to people over the years that find for their culture they're building, outsourcing everything makes a lot of sense. It depends on what you want to build and what your leadership's committed to. The hiring versus in Canada is the values we've seen of hiring in Canada are, they're local, you're building a team, you get to mentor, train, and develop people. Hence, their output and consistency can be quite a lot higher. However, it is more expensive. So we've seen companies that try, when they are growing quickly, is doing both external, international, or contract style relationships, and also trying in Canada. My input is, it seems that over the years, hiring in Canada or the US has produced better results over longer periods of time. Contract is great for short-term wins with really clear specifics and exactly what needs to get done in the timelines. Ambiguity with international or overseas contracts has always seemed to be really frustrating for CTOs that are trying to bring them in, because it's difficult to always have to keep on rephrasing the structures of those agreements. Alison, from your experience, how do you feel about that with recruiting, working in individuals internationally or versus in Canada?
I think that there are different factors to it, and going back to your branding and who you are and being able to tell your story, and if there's a lot of people actually really do want to be part of building Canadian companies, they love that. So there is some advantage to that in terms of salaries, typically lower than the US. So it depends on the market that you're looking at, but and just in piece of contract, contracts have their pros and cons. It can be tricky to find people who want to do a contract. So, you're looking at specifically people who generally just, are consultants and have contracts. So it's a different class of people.
It kind of goes back to the very first stages. What's the plan?
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult to know what the plan is. So sometimes it's great just to talk it out, right? we find people when they're in growth and they receive their funding, you're kind of going from 30 kilometers an hour on a road to 100 kilometers an hour on a highway. And people kind of expect that you can just start driving really fast on a really busy highway. But it's okay to acknowledge that, you know, I need to go learn from 30 to 50 to 60 to 100. So I think that idea of international versus Canada is probably worth an offline conversation about, hey, you know, what are we building? What does it look like? And I support both. So it just depends on which path you need. How do you build a hiring plan? So Farzad shared, how do you build your hiring plan and team early stages in a high-tech startup? How do you budget for it? Probably a bigger conversation about hiring plan and teams in early stages. We work a lot with companies in startup stages. It's kind of what we do. So we can share with you what we see other companies do and why and what worked for them. And then you can kind of pick and choose what you like. So I think that's the best way to say on that, because it will be different for each person in the room today. The other thing is, what are the main differences between the US and Canada if we compare BC and Washington State specifically? My perspective is cost is a huge one. Even though the world is remote first right now or remote friendly, Canada is still between 20 to 30% less per person in terms of salary. US is still very expensive. And it depends on the, it's interesting because local market affects salary locally, meaning that, you know, Silicon Valley versus San Fran versus Edmonton. As recruiting professionals, we'll see a huge differential between where that person does live. Even though everyone thinks it's a remote world, where you live makes a huge impact. So when we're working with companies that are more challenging roles, we will actually condition them to be like, hey, let's talk about where we can look. Can we make this role remote? What does that look like? There's certain roles in technology companies that we know are a lot harder to fill than easier to fill. So if they want them local, we'll be able to tell them, hey, this kind of makes sense locally, but we need to make this across Canada because we know what the market's like. And we can actually bring up stats while we're talking with people, and they can say, we want this person local, and we can bring up our stats and show, well, there's 13 people that have this skill set locally. We're probably going to have to look across North America. So people give us their wish list and we got to kind of break it down.
That was it. There was one more earlier in the conversation that you pretty much answered. They were asking about what sites people use to evaluate employment brand, but you mentioned 3. Are there any others that people should be?
Yes, it's a great question. We left out Indeed. Although Indeed stole what Glassdoor is doing. So to give you an input is there's the number 1, 2, and 3 job boards in Canada right now are LinkedIn, Indeed, and Glassdoor. That's 1, 2, and 3. Those are the big players. Okay, so Indeed is a very interesting technology because I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen them all kind of shape. Indeed started as a job aggregator. So they didn't actually even post their own jobs at the beginning. So that's how Indeed made it. They took all these random job boards and put them all into one, so you can almost go on there like Google and search for jobs. So they actually got really high really quick because they had a good business model. Then they started to actually get people to pay directly on Indeed to get the highest rankings on Indeed. So very smart. Bring in the whole market, then get sponsored ads to the top, which we have to pay now huge money for. Now what Indeed has done even further is Indeed now has added review tabs like Glassdoor. And they've kind of been playing around with that for the last year or so and trying out and adding and taking some stuff away. So what their goal is at Indeed, I think, is to try to be the Glassdoor, right? So they're trying to steal the market from Glassdoor and add these review options. So you should definitely go to Indeed as well and see what's going on over there. People don't review as much as Glassdoor, but it would still impact the candidate experience from start to finish, because if we know the number 1, 2, and 3 job boards across Canada, those are probably areas you should be on watch on. So it is, I mean, I remember the first day I was on Indeed and I saw that they had a review thing. And I was like, ooh, Indeed is smart. They are realizing what they need to do. And now it's getting more and more impactful. So you may have a ranking on Indeed right now. So totally cool place to check. Besides that, I don't think anything else is like, there's always going to be random tools, but for what I see is those are the players. those are what you want to focus on immediately and get on right away. And then that's pretty much it. Alison, have you seen any other tools that are big on that experience?
Those are really the main ones. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Your website is definitely part of that story. I know that you already talked about that, but for sure you want to see what, through the lens of a candidate, not just a customer or potential customer or potential candidate. What does that really look like?
Okay, we got, I think there's 2 more questions that just came up in 3 minutes. So maybe we'll answer quickly.
Well, this last one's interesting. In local hiring, do you pay them local wages or company's location wages when the position is remote? This is a huge, cool question. We got very limited time, but the world of remote has changed the landscape of salaries, meaning that smart candidates got on this quickly and have realized that they can fetch a pretty penny based on their skill sets. Yet some candidates still are not thinking in that terms or caring about it. And some people are willing to accept less money based on the company's brand and mission and where they're based. So the local wages versus company location or remote, for example, if you're looking at a senior full stack developer, the real thing is you need to speak to each candidate and understand their expectations. You need to understand why. You need to understand why they're interested in working with you. And that will help you understand the whole package on the candidate. Because one might be asking for more, but they're worth it after you really learn about all the reasons they want to join. Or maybe someone's asking for less and you think it's quote unquote good value, and you spend more time learning about where they've moved, why they want to work with you in this package that they come with. And you realize the low one is not a value anymore. So it's a very case by case. And I know it's difficult to say, talk to all of them and spend that time, but it's important because if somebody comes from, for example, the US and they're requiring more, they may be worth more. And you need time and discussions in your business to be able to have those conversations. Because if you're caught in bandwidth and pay grades, it's difficult to stay within them and also not have conversations around, hey, does this person, should they have more? And here's why, and give your team flexibility to talk about that. Google's Playbook, HR Playbook, one of the most famous things in the Google Playbook is pay your people unfairly. That was right from the beginning for Google. And why they did that is they had pay grades and job titles, but they also gave freedom to the hiring managers to support why maybe one person is worth more than the other based on their backgrounds, their experiences, and what they can bring. So it's kind of a long-winded focus, but it's good to understand the candidate's expectations and if it's worth it, and learn more about that person to see if they are worth the extra or not versus getting caught into pay grades.
Okay, we have to wrap up, but if you have a 30-second answer on Ara's question about how do candidates think of stock options, especially?
Oh, great question. Okay, so I'll take that quickly. It depends on the candidate's level of skepticism. So what do I mean by that? I mean, we've done a lot of software and tech hires for a lot of different companies. Usually more junior candidates get quite excited about them because it can be considered valuable, and they can be. We've had a lot of senior candidates say prefer options, meaning options not to take a stock option, because they've gone through this experience over 10 to 15 years where people kept on holding stock options over them and the company doesn't actually exit. And they are in a different stage in their lives. For example, maybe they have a family and maybe they have a mortgage. So my suggestion is it's great to have options for stock options, but some people will value it more than others. So have freedom to have that conversation and create a compelling package for that person, because the best companies create packages for the individual. So I remember a senior stack person was amazing. And my first time I heard this, I was really shocked. And this is like a long time ago. And they're like, I don't want the stock options. Can I just get more salary? And in my head, when I was more junior, I was like, oh, that's not very nice. But now I get it, because he shared his experience. He had 3 children. He had a mortgage. And he said, I've gone through this before. That's what's going on. So okay, that's a quick answer.
Great. Thank you. If you want a longer answer, you can ask for that 30-minute follow-up. So thank you again. Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you, Matt and Alison, for sharing your expertise and pulling the curtain behind the recruitment world. And hopefully we'll see you again for another topic.
Oh yeah,
Thank you
totally.
so much.
Thanks for organizing, and we're really
Yes.
happy to be part of New Ventures. So book us for that half hour and we can chat more.
Awesome. Thank you again. And thanks everyone. Have a nice rest of your
Thanks,
day.
Angie. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks to you both.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.